All right, what's going on? Greens, greens, greens. Peace to those in the chat room. May peace and power elevation be to all of you. Thank you for coming in. Thank y'all for tuning in live in effect. So today, as you can see, that I am going to deal with the topic about child soldier. Now, we talk about kids that go through a lot, right? Growing up in a chaotic household. Now, every little kid has a dream where they go outside, they play with their friends, they play cards, they play double dutch, they swing, play football, basketball, things like that. That's what little kids normally do, right? Little kids normally, usually they'll just be in the house playing video games, be on the computer all day, things like that. Well, the story about the individual I'm going to talk about, his name is Ishmael Beah. All right, he's from Sierra Leone, and he did not have an average childhood. He had a very rough one, an extremely rough one. And as a matter of fact, his childhood was very traumatizing. And it's so traumatizing that an average kid in America couldn't live what he'd been through. And it's amazing that he's still here today doing the work that he's doing as an activist, here telling his story about what was it like growing up in a country like Sierra Leone, being a child soldier. Talking about at the age of 9, 10 years old, carrying an AK-47. Okay, have to walk miles because of a military coup that took place in his country. Witnessing bodies on top of bodies on top of bodies, blood everywhere. That's what this young man had to go through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into his life story. Today is his birthday. I believe he turned 40 years old. So today's date is Monday, November the 23rd. Okay. So yeah, we're going to go into his story. We're going to go into his life. And we're going to talk about children who are involved in military at a very young age. So I have some information available. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Also, make sure you, if you want to donate, you can hit my Cash App at the bottom. So let's go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, for those of you who may not be familiar with Ishmael Beah, he was this young man that wrote this book right here called A Long Way Gone, a memoirs of a boy soldier. All right, Ishmael Beah. This book was written in 2007. I had this book for a very, very long time. For about 13 years. I had it since I was in college, since my freshman year. And I remember this book was given to us to read because we had to read this book. And I went to one of his lectures that he did a long time ago, and he was telling a story about this. So I came across his name again. I just went back and I just said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and read some of this. and I'm gonna highlight it, and I might as well go ahead and talk about it because ain't no sense in me just holding on to the book and not doing anything with it. So that's why I got this book right here. All right. Now let's go ahead and let's look at it, shall we? All right, give me a second, you guys. Give me 1 second. See if I can switch over here. And get started. I'm back. I had to switch over, excuse me. So, all right, so right here, this is Ishmael Beah. This young man right here with the dreadlocks. Got a picture of him. That's him again. Okay. Very handsome guy. Look incredibly handsome. All right, so let's look at his story. So Ishmael Beah is a Sierra Leonean author and human rights activist who rose to fame with his acclaimed memoir, A Long Way Gone. His novel, Radiance of Tomorrow, was published in January of 2014. His most recent novel, Little Family, was published in April of 2020. All right. So let's go down to his biography. So it says in 1991, the Sierra Leone Civil War started. Rebels invaded Beah's hometown, Mambiwimo, if I'm saying it, Mambiwimo, located in southern province of Sierra Leone, and he was forced to flee. Separated from his family, he spent months wandering south with a group of other boys. At the age of 13, he was forced to become a child soldier, according to Beah's account. He fought for almost 3 years before being rescued by UNICEF. Now let's see what they're about. Okay, so UNICEF, which means United Nations International Children Emergency Fund. Okay. So they've been around since 1946. So what do they do? All right, it's a United Nations agency responsible for providing humanitarian and developmental aid to children worldwide. The agency is among the most widespread and recognizable social welfare organization in the world, with a presence in 192 countries and territories. UNICEF's activities included providing immunization and disease prevention, administering treatment for children and mothers with HIV, enhancing childhood and maternal nutrition, improving sanitation, promoting education, and providing emergency relief in response to disasters. All right. So basically what they're doing is the United CEF or UNICEF, basically their whole goal is to save those children who are not only refugees, but children who have been involved in wars, civil wars, and parents who come from impoverished countries, making sure that they have the resources and be able to get adequate health insurance or some type of health care, and also adequate education. So that's the main goal, and that's their main purpose. All right. And so that's who rescued Ishmael Beah. So let's go ahead. It says Beah fought for the government army against the rebels in 1997. He fled Freetown by the help of the UNICEF due to the increasing violence and found his way to New York City, where he lived with Laura Sims, his foster mother. And in New York City, Beah attended to United Nations International School. After high school, he enrolled at Oberlin College and graduated in 2004 with a degree in political science. Okay. Beah said he doesn't remember how many people he killed during his time in Sierra Leone government army. He and his other soldiers smoked marijuana and sniffed, sniffed amphetamines. Amphetamines. What is that? All right, so let's see. What kind of drug is it? So amphetamine is it's a central nervous system, right? It is used in the treatment of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, those who have ADHD, narcolepsy, and obesity. It was discovered in 1887, existed as two in was it enantiomers. These words are technical. Properly referred to a specific chemical, the racemic free base, which is equal parts of the two enantiomers in their pure anime form. So, okay, I get the logistics of it. I'm not going to try to read all those technical vocabulary words. You know, those words are very technical, scientific. So basically, it's a drug basically that is for people who really have ADHD, right? And it controls their nervous system. And, you know, that's what the drug is. So, but for somebody like him, to get on those type of drugs, it would have some type of really serious psychological effect on his brain because he was so young and he taking a strong drugs like that. Though that type of drug is really meant for people who have some type of mental disorder like ADHD. You know, basically. All right. Anyways, let's continue to read. And brown. We trying to figure out what is this brown. What's the brown? Brown is a purported form of cocaine insufflation mixed with smokeless gunpowder. This powder often contains nitroglycerin, a drug prescribed for heart condition, which might cause vasodilation, permitting the cocaine insufflation to move more freely through the body. This in turn is believed to allow for a more intense high. The term may also refer to heroin. Wow. So what I'm getting so far, that not only he was a child soldier, but he was also hooked on drugs at a very young age. So he was forced to go out here in the military. He was separated from his family. Then he got caught up in doing drugs. He got caught up with doing some marijuana and some brown and cocaine and all this other stuff. Hardcore drugs. Not just regular drugs, but just doing hardcore stuff. But let's continue on. Let's see what else they talk about. I mean, I can't imagine, how do you do drugs that's mixed with gunpowder? I never knew somebody can do it. I'm still baffled by this. Before I continue, I just never understood, how can't you do drugs that has gunpowder in it? Cocaine and gunpowder? That's a dangerous combination. That's very dangerous. I mean, I just can't never picture that. You put some gunpowder, the same powder you use in gun, and you mixing it with cocaine and you putting it into your system. That's a very powerful thing. That's very dangerous. Now, I'm surprised he didn't die from this, because that's a combination for a child to do a gunpowder. I'm baffled by this. I can't. Ooh. All right, he said he blames the addictions and the brainwashing for his violence and cites them and the pressures of the army as reasons for his inability to escape of his own. You left. It was as good as being dead. Wow. And during a February 14, 2007 appearance on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, Beah said that he believed that return to civilized society was more difficult than the acting of becoming a child soldier, saying that dehumanizing children is a relatively easy task. Rescued in 1996 by a coalition of UNICEF and NGOs, he found the transition difficult. He and his fellow child soldiers fought frequently. He credits one volunteer, Nurse Esther, with having the patience and compassion required to bring him through the difficult period. She recognized his interest in American rap music and reggae since he was a kid, gave him a Walkman and a Run DMC cassette, and employed music as his bridge to his past prior to the violence. Slowly, he accepted her assurance that it's not your fault. Living in Freetown with an uncle, he went to school and was invited to speak in 1996 at the UN in New York. When Freetown was overrun by the joint forces of the rebels, RUF, or Revolutionary United Front, and Army of Sierra Leone in 1997. The Army of Sierra Leone was originally fighting against the Revolutionary United Front. He contacted Laura Sim, whom he had met the years before in New York, and made his way to the United States. If I choose to feel guilty for what I have done, I want to be dead myself, Beah said. I live knowing that I have been given a second life, and I just try to have fun and be happy and live it the best I can. In 2009, the 29-year-old traveled home to Sierra Leone with an ABC News camera, a return that he described as bittersweet. Later, in February 2013, he traveled to Calgary and spoke at the My World Conference. In 2013, Beah married French-born Congolese-Iranian Priscilla Kunku Hoveda. They have 3 children and live around the world. All right. And so here's his recognition and awards. The book that I showed you guys, A Long Way Gone, was nominated for a Quill Award in the Best Debut Author category for 2007. Times Magazine, Lev Grossman named it one of the top 10 nonfiction books of 2007, ranking it at number 3 and praising it as painfully sharp as its ability to take readers behind the dead eyes of the child soldier in a way no other writer has. The book was also included in Amazon's 100 books to read in a lifetime list. And then it also talked about his new novel, Radiance of Tomorrow. Beah explores the life of a community, including Benjamin and Bakari, 2 friends who returned to Bakari's hometown in Paris after the Civil War. The village is in ruins, the ground covered in bones. Radiance of Tomorrow is said to be written with the moral urgency of a parable and the shearing precision of a first-hand account. It earned positive reviews in the New York Times Book Review, the Washington Post, and the Boston Globe. All right. So on January 24th of 2020, Beah spoke together with Romeo Delares and Omar Kader at conference at Dalhousie University on human rights and child soldiers. And in April of 2020, Beah published his 3rd book, Little Family, a deeply affecting novel. Little Family tells the story of 5 young people living at the margins of society, struggling to replace the homes they have lost with the one they have created together. Okay. Now it says there's some controversy about his book. The accuracy of some events and the chronology in A Long Way Gone have been called into question, particularly the claim that Beah became a child soldier in 1993 rather than 1995. Beah has defended his account. All right. So it says, see also Children of War, which is a documentary by Brian Singer, P.W. Singer, investigating author of Children at War in 2005. All right. So here's the bibliography. Okay. And he got one called When Good Comes from Bad. And then there's the reference at the bottom. All right. Here we go. So here's another article here that I want to show you all. This article comes from NewYorkTimes.com, New York Times newspaper. This was written in 2007 on January 14th. The making and unmaking of a child soldier. Now, I'm just going to read some of it, and the rest you can check out for yourself. But here it is. This was written by Ishmael Beah himself. Sometimes I feel that living in New York City, have a good family and friends, and just being alive is a dream, that perhaps this second life of mine isn't really happening. Whenever I speak at the United Nations, UNICEF, or elsewhere to raise awareness of continual and rampant recruitments of children in wars around the world, I come to realize that I still do not fully understand how I could have possibly survived the civil war in my country in Sierra Leone. Most of my friends, after meeting the woman who I think of as my new mother, a Brooklyn-born white Jewish American, assumed that I was either adopted at a very young age or that my mother married an African man. They would never imagine that I was 17 when I came to live with her, and that I had been a child soldier and participated in one of the most brutal wars in recent history. In early 1993, I was 12. I was separated from my family as the Sierra Leone Civil War, which began 2 years earlier, came into my life. The rebel army known as the Revolutionary United Front attacked my town in the southern part of the country. I ran away along paths and roads that were littered with dead bodies, some mutilated in ways so horrible that looking at them left a permanent scar on my memory. I ran for days, weeks, and months, and I couldn't believe that the simple, precious world I have known, where nights were celebrated with storytelling and dancing, and mornings greeting with the singing of birds and cock crows, now was a place where only guns spoke, and sometimes it seemed even the sun hesitated to shine. After I discovered that my parents and two brothers had been killed, I felt even more lost and worthless in a world that had become pregnant with fear and suspicious as neighbor turned against neighbor and child against parent. Surviving each passing minute was nothing short of a miracle. After almost a year of running, I, along with some friends I met along the way, arrived at an army base in the southeastern region. We thought we were now safe. Little did we know what lay ahead. And then right here, he speaks about his first battle. So let's read a little bit about it. Now, as you can see, his story is pretty traumatizing and sad. So in 1994, the first battle. I have never been so afraid to go anywhere in my life as I was that first day. As we walked into the arms of the forest, tears began to form in my eyes, but I struggled to hide them and gripped my gun for comfort. We exhaled quietly, afraid that our own breathing could cause our deaths. The lieutenant led the line that I was in. He raised his fist in the air and we stopped moving. Then he slowly brought it down and we sat on one heel, our eyes surveying the forest. We began to move swiftly among the bushes until we came to the edge of a swamp, where we formed in ambush, aiming our guns into the bog. We lay flat on our stomachs and waited. I was laying next to my friend Josiah. At 11, he was even younger than I was. Musa, a friend my age, 13, was also nearby. I looked around to see if I could catch their eyes, but they were concentrating on the invisible target in the swamp. The tops of my eyes began to ache, and the pain slowly rose up to my head. My ears became warm, and tears were running down my cheeks, even though I wasn't crying. The veins on my arms stood out, and I could feel them pulsating as they had begun to breathe of their own accord. We waited in the quiet as hunters do. The silence tormented me. Um, hmm. Let's go on to right here real quick. The what he say? The short trees in the swamp began to shake as the rebels made their way through them. They weren't yet visible, but the lieutenant had passed the word down through a whisper that was relayed like a roll of falling dominoes. Fire on my command as we watched a group of men dressed in civilian clothes emerge from under the tiny bushes. They waved their guns, and more fighters came out. Some were boys as young as we were. They sat together in line, waving their hands, discussing a strategy. My lieutenant ordered a rocket propelled grenade to be fired, but the commander of the rebels heard it as it whooshed its way out the forest. Retreat, he called out to his men, and the grenades blasted, got only a few rebels who split bodies, who split bodies flew in the air. The explosion was followed by an exchange of gunfire from both sides. Hmm. Just imagine, just imagine being that young. You separate from your family. Now, there are kids that actually had to grow up in an environment witnessing their loved ones being killed in front of their face, their best friends, the elders, and many others. But just imagine just being a child soldier. You don't get no childhood. You don't get to go and just have fun. A kid that young doesn't get to sleep well at night. They just become very restless, and they're always watching over their shoulders to see who is going to be the next target. And they're worried, are they going to be the target? Now, his story, again, is very tragic. Something that not even a full grown-up can actually witness. You have kids who witness a lot of things. But in his sense, it takes a strong survivor to actually get through the process of going through war. He wasn't playing with BB guns, okay? He was dealing with actual guns, AK-47. He had to go out there and kill people. That's what he had to do. It wasn't something that he wanted to do, but that's what he was forced to do as a kid. And it scared the hell out of him. He was no longer the same person. See, nobody wants to talk about children who are abandoned. People don't want to talk about how children can be affected by the things they see. Then you want to know why it influenced their behavior. This is why you got to deal with psychology, especially child psychology. This kind of thing right here, going into a war at the age of 10 years old, you have no clue. You know nothing about no guns. You don't even know what the war is about. You don't know why they fighting. You just know that you happen to lose somebody in your village or people that you close to in your village. You know that these army of soldiers come in your village, shooting at your family, thousands of people getting killed. And you watching all these bodies laying on the ground. And some of them you familiar with, some of them you don't even know. And you have to walk over bodies every day, just walk over them. Seeing bodies being mutilated, bodies being pieces and parts all over the place. Who can ever picture that, imagine that? But the part that really stood out to me the most was the fact that this young man was doing drugs, hardcore drugs, cocaine and gunpowder. I still can't fathom that. How do you mix cocaine and gunpowder together? How do you even do that? I just want to know what type of serious effect does gunpowder have on the person's body? Because I know that is something dangerous. That is a dangerous experiment. So what type of effect does it truly have on the brain? What's the long-term effects behind doing gunpowder and cocaine mixing together? That's what I want to know. And who gave this child the gunpowder and cocaine? And why did he have to get caught in drugs? Just the other day, and this kind of going to be off topic. So the other day I was watching something online, and I seen something about Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe is dealing with a crisis of cough syrup or codeine. That's what they call codeine. They doing a lot of codeine out there in Zimbabwe. These are teenagers. I was totally in shock. I said, these kids are actually doing codeine and they don't have not one single care. But at the same time, I see why. Because Zimbabwe is one of the poorest countries in Africa, in South Africa, in the southern part. And they rely on farming. So when these kids ain't got nothing in their environment, as far as economic resources is concerned, they look to elsewhere to cope with their pain. And they turn to drugs because they like, look, we ain't got nothing to lose. We really don't got shit. And the things that we do have is controlled by foreigners. So what the fuck? Then another thing that really stood out to me, in Nairobi, Kenya, they have an area where people who were former drug addicts, they all go and hang out in that area, right, to recover from their drug addiction. These are people that done shoot up heroin, like they done shot up heroin, and they were doing cocaine. They were doing all type of illicit drugs. And they have an area, like a living, a living facility for those who are recovering drug addicts. My professor, well, not my professor, my counselor always tell me, you never know what your neighbor going through. You never know what people have to deal with. And you got to be careful when you do certain things to individuals because it may trigger them to react because of that very thing that you did. Remind them of something very traumatic in the past. Just like when the Army veterans come home, or the veterans period, they can't be around certain stuff. Like, many of them cannot stand fireworks. They can't stand the sound of fireworks. Why? Because the fireworks is equivalent to hearing gunshots. It's equivalent to hearing bombs. I remember when I was coming up, I'll never forget this. I seen some kids, some teenage boys, they had those little popping things, those little firecrackers that you throw on the ground, they pop. All right, there was a veteran, and he was mentally insane. He was downtown, and the kids was throwing those little white things. They look like rocks, but you throw them on the ground, and they just make those poppy noise. Those little loud. They go pop, 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 pop. So they was throwing them on the ground, and all of a sudden he started jumping up. He started jumping up and started doing all of this, and they were laughing. They thought it was funny. But when somebody like that, yeah, you might think it's fun and game until that person snaps on you. Then somebody wants to say, oh, this individual wrong. You can't play around with people like that. Especially somebody that's been in war and they're suffering. You can't play around like that. So you have to be extremely careful. Deal with individuals on that level. Because you never know what's going through their mind and what they had to endure and what they experienced. All right. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and play a video. Oh, also, if you guys want to check this out, it's in NewYorkTimes.com. You can go on NewYorkTimes.com and look up The Making and Unmaking of a Child Soldier by Ishmael Beah, which was written in January 14 of 2007. Okay. You can look this up for yourself if you want to read more about this article. All right, so I'm going to play a short video.
So much.
Yeah, I'm going to play a short video real fast, and then please. So this video here was when Ishmael did his interview with CBS News with Katie Curry back in 2007. All right. So let's go ahead and play it. Please welcome. Give me a second. All right, here it is.
The trial of former Liberian President Charles Taylor began today in The Hague, and for the first time, prosecutors have made the recruitment of children under 15 in order to fight a war crime. CBS News spoke to one of the child soldiers about fighting in one of West Africa's most brutal wars.
When the war started and it came to my part of the country in Sierra Leone in the south, and I started running from it. And between 12 and 13, I had seen so much, and I had lost my immediate family. Mother, father, and two brothers were killed, and I was with a group of other kids. And naturally, we thought if we went to a military base, we would be protected, but that turned out not to be the case. And we were forcefully recruited in this army. We were not given a choice. If we left, we were basically going to be killed by the rebels who would consider us the enemy, and then joining was not our best interest, but it was a way to stay alive in a way. But then, after the initial coercion and the initial use of drugs, this became our reality. We lost ourselves completely in this war, that it became the only thing we knew. That was our life. As time goes on, you become addicted to the drugs themselves, that you have to find them to take them yourself. And in the beginning, the killings are also very difficult to do, but as time goes on, you've lost yourself completely. It becomes your life. You have to do it to stay alive. The commander begins to look like your father figure. The lieutenants, the sergeants begin to look like older brothers that you've lost and family members you don't have anymore. So you develop a very strong sense of attachment to these groups. And in this time, these are the only things that are, this is the only kind of structure that is functioning in any kind of way. So young people develop a strong attachment to them. You become loyal. You want to please them, just as you want to please your elders. With the drugs and trauma, you develop this sense of invisibility, that you're now a combatant, you're part of something, you're not running away from this war anymore. You can bring this madness to people now, not they will not bring it to you. So all these kinds of stuff, you believe that they have given you this kind of power. When I would write about certain instances that I witnessed, or during this time, there were exhibition killings that we looked at, we participated in, and we kind of cheered people on to do certain things. And when I would think about those things, it would bring a very strong discomfort within my own body, within my being. And I think because of these things, I came to realize that the only reason that a child can function in this particular world, if you lose yourself completely, when your faculties are not in place, if you are fully functioning, you're able to exhibit those human emotions, you cannot live in that world. There are all kinds of drugs, ranging from your common marijuana to amphetamines that I don't know the names of, to cocaine, what is called brown, which could be the mixture of cocaine and gunpowder, heroin and gunpowder. And all these things made you numb. And also watching like the war films and things, I developed a sense of invisibility that you cannot die and things like that. But in my group, there wasn't such a kind of thing, but there was more a belief that the commanders had some sort of juju. They had some sort of magical power that, so when they led you to battle or when they told you to go somewhere, that they were protecting you through some sort of magical power they had. That's cool. Again, this is one of the reasons why children are recruited. You cannot have adults to believe that kind of stuff. You drag them into this kind of madness, but you can have kids believe this. But regaining yourself, your humanity, it is a very, it's possible, but it's a very difficult process. It's not as quick as some people think it is. It took me 8 months just to regain myself and continue that process of healing. For some people, it will take longer. For each child, it's different. If I went to the bathroom to take a shower or to open a tap water, all I could see is blood pouring out of the thing until I look at it continuously before I could see water. If I tried to sleep, I would dream of certain things and I would wake up and pick fights. I had to withdraw from the drugs. I had to face the memories. It took people who were selflessly compassionate and they were patient. They persevered with us. It required people who were willing to look at us as children, regardless of what our lives had been. And that helped us. That rekindled our own humanity. It made us know that there was more to our lives than what we had come to believe. And also, we had lost the faith in human beings, to trust adults especially. So that also had to be regained. I don't think I am necessarily angry in the sense that I will want revenge from them or anything, because I've come to know that that only brings about more suffering. But I think people who orchestrated this and who took so many lives in childhood, so we should be held accountable. Right? think, because this sets an example that you cannot do that to children anywhere. I love Sierra Leone regardless of what happened there. I was back there last year, and it's my home. I think one of the reasons I gained the strength within me to survive that war, to continue living, is based on things that I learned from my early childhood in that tradition, that culture. And it's a beautiful place. People have a remarkable resilience and very hopeful people, kind and generous. And I would like to live there. The simplicity of life there I can't find anywhere else. And which is why I hope that whoever really comes in power next in Sierra Leone can really do something for the people so that we can have that country back. Because it's very dear to some of us, even though we've suffered there quite a lot.
All right, so that's the life story of Ishmael Beah, and he's giving his account on what it was like growing up being a child soldier, coming out of a country like Sierra Leone. So, what I want to do real fast before I close out, all right, I want to go into more detail about this whole child soldiering thing, and as far as is denotation. So that's what I want to do before I leave out. All right, give me a second. All right, so let's look more into about child soldiers in various parts of the world. So, well, we're gonna look at more child soldiers in Africa. All right. So, child soldiers in Africa refer to military use of children under the age of 18 by national armed forces and other armed groups in Africa. Typically, this classification includes children serving in non-combatant roles, such as cooks or messengers, as well as those serving in combatant roles. In 2008, it was estimated that 40% of child soldiers worldwide were in Africa, and that the use of child soldiers in armed conflict was increasing faster than any other continent. Additionally, average age of children recruited as soldiers appears to be decreasing. As of 2017, the UN listed that 7 out of 14 countries recruiting and using child soldiers in state forces and armed groups were in Africa: Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Mali, Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan. So here's the overview. Dealing with the exact data on the number of child soldiers in Africa is not known, partly due to the inaccessibility of some regions. In addition, there are a high number of unregistered births in several African nations, making it difficult to estimate the number of child soldiers in certain countries. In 2003, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimate that up to half of children involved in the state armed forces and non-state armed groups worldwide were in Africa. In 2004, Child Soldiers International estimate that 1,000 children were being used in this way on the continent. In 2008, an academic estimate put the total at 120,000 children, or 40% of the global total of child soldiers. All right. Now, let's go down and say what's the reasons. The reasons for recruitment by armed groups. Child soldiers are typically recruited because they are seen by armed groups as expendable and cheap to maintain. Other factors include the global proliferation of light automatic weapons, which children can easily handle. The relatively greater willingness of children to fight for non-monetary incentives such as honor, prestige, revenge, and duty, and the greater psychological malleability of children relative to adults, which make them easier to control, deceive, and indoctrinate. Some leaders of armed groups have claimed that children, despite their underdevelopment, bring their own qualities as combatants to a fighting union, being often remarkably fearless, agile, and hardy. Journalist Jeffrey Gittleman suggests that the concentration of child soldiers in Africa is due to the shift among armed groups from being ideal oriented to economically driven. Additionally, countries like Sudan has shifted towards the use of child soldiers after the decolonization and independence from Europe in 1956. Countries were led into poverty, disease, war, and kidnapping, which in turn led to forced child labor. So basically, the reason why a lot of these armed groups recruit children to be soldiers because they don't have to worry about paying them, and they don't see values in them. They see that these kids are cheap. They're not as valuable, and they're young. So it's so easy to control and manipulate them. At one point in time in the United States, before they had an age limit, they used to recruit younger kids. They used to recruit kids young as 14 to be in the army. Anybody could get drafted. You didn't have to have a college education. You didn't have to graduate from high school. You can just be in the army at 14. The reason why they want them so young, because they were easy to control and discipline. So now, in order to be in the armed forces or serving the armed forces in the United States, you got to be about 17, and you have to graduate from school, and you can't have no type of record. All right, so you can't have no felony records, and if you have certain type of misdemeanors, depends on what your misdemeanor is, they may let you get a pass or they may not give you a pass. So they're a little bit more strict now, but at one point in time they wasn't as strict. They wasn't that strict. They didn't really care. It didn't make a difference if you did graduate from school or didn't. They just wanted some soldiers. But now things are different. So yeah, if you want to look up more information about child soldiers in Africa, just go ahead and put it up on WikiOne. Yep, and then let's see what you can find at the bottom of the page. Okay, you got the further reading, right? You got the bibliography. You have references. Fact sheet, children associated with armed groups and forces in Central Africa. Let's look that up. All right, so here it is. It goes into more information. All right, Republic of Chad, Republic of Sudan, Central Africa Republic, Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Republic of Cameroon. The list goes on and on and on. All right. So, anyways, that concludes the information for today. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate you all for tuning in. And if you want to go ahead and support the channel, you see my Cash App going across the screen. That's my Cash App information, $ Tip World. So if you want to go ahead and donate, you're more than welcome to do so if you can. If not, that's okay. That's fine with me. And also, you can make sure you share this channel, hit the notification bell, like, subscribe, all that great stuff. Make sure you do that. Again, thank you guys for those of you that tune in to watch. Until then, I will reconnect with you all later. So please be safe, be careful, and be mindful. All right? All right, then. Thank you so much. Peace.